Chris Smith comes from a big family. Well, I think it's a huge family. And he had lots of cousins, lots of brothers and sisters, and they did all kinds of crazy things growing up, all kinds of adventures, and just had a great time. Then he left home fairly young to work with the RCMP. That's the police in Canada. And he loved working with the RCMP. It was great. It was another type of adventure, and he was really enjoying it. But one day he got to talking with his cousin, and they started reminiscing about all the things that they used to do in those good old days and all those fun rides that they would do with family and friends. And he realized just how long it had been since he had actually been out and done an adventure with his family and friends. They decided right then and there they had to do an adventure. They got to do something together. So they ended up coming up with an idea to explore the remote roads of northern Quebec by motorcycle. Because some of the roads in northern Quebec are just very long dirt roads with literally nothing around them, nothing but wilderness. So really incredible, but really remote. Anyway, he put the word out to his family and friends, and pretty soon, very quickly, he had a group to go on that first adventure. I guess no one really knew what to expect with this, but it was an eclectic group of riders and bikes. They didn't reach their goal, not all of them. Some of them went home with broken bikes. Some of the bikes were shipped home. Some went home with broken bones, sprained egos. So when Chris suggested that they should do this again next year, not everybody was that gung-ho about going. But he did manage to get another group together for the next year and attempt another ride into northern Quebec. Again, it wasn't perfect. I mean, it didn't go off as planned. They ended up stranded for days. They made the most of it, sharing meals, collecting stories, sort of strengthening bonds that makes these trips unforgettable. It wasn't just another ride. It was really a reminder of why they go. It's a reminder of why we go, for the adventure, for the challenge, for the connection, and for the serendipity of it all. I'm Jim Martin. This is Adventure Rider Radio. Stay with us. We got a good one for you.
Sam Manikin, Simon, Austin Vince, Simon Pavey, Helga Pedersen, Charlie Borman, Chris Birch,
Elizabeth Martin,
Jocelyn Snow,
Quentin Smote, and you're listening to Adventure Rider Radio.
It's wind pressure that powers the Moto Breeze chain oiler. No electrical or vacuum connections. It delivers the oil to a felt pad on your swing arm. No nozzles near your sprockets. 1 ounce of oil gets 1,000 miles or 1,600 kilometers. Get more miles from your chain and sprockets. MotoBreeze.com. And Green Chili Adventure Gear offers American-made, heavy-duty luggage systems for all types of motorcycles. You can turn any dry bag into luggage using their strapping system. And of course, Green Chili Adventure Gear is tested in extreme weather and terrain to withstand the abuse that adventure riding gives it. Tough, reliable gear. GreenChiliADV.com. Best Rest Products is the maker of the Cycle Pump, the best tire inflator for motorcyclists. You can inflate a flat tire in less than 3 minutes. Is founded, assembled, and warranted for life in the USA. They're also the inventor and retailer of the combination tire iron / wrench, the Hex Wrench. CyclePump.com.
Hi, my name is Christopher Smith, also known as C.W. Smith. I'm a retired RCMP officer of 35 years, and I live in Mono, Ontario, better known as Hockley Valley, Ontario.
Chris, welcome to Adventure Rider Radio.
Thanks, Jim. It's a pleasure.
You said you worked for the RCMP. You're now retired. For those who don't know, what is RCMP?
That's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. It's the federal police force of Canada, and it's kind of a unique police force. I'm sure there's direct comparisons in other parts of the world, but in Canada, we cover all of the federal policing duties that people would recognize from TV. We do this narcotics and personal protection for, government officials and and stuff like that. And basically, we do all of the federal enforcement for Canada. But on the flip side, the organization offers its services to provinces and towns for hire as their provincial police or their town police or their city police. So it's kind of a double-edged sword type of thing where we're doing federal policing and what people would recognize as detective work. And then on the flip side, we could have a contract with Moncton, New Brunswick as a city policeman in uniform patrolling. And so it's complex, and some people, have a hard time understanding it. And over the years, when I worked with, the federal agencies in the United States, we would be constantly explaining to them, on a big case, why we can call a uniformed policeman working on the street to check something for us in, Broken Twig, Alberta type of thing. And they would be, wow, this is interesting. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times they like that because of the connection rate from, large criminal investigations right down to knocking on somebody's door in a uniform in, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, perhaps.
You grew up in New Brunswick and you started riding when you're about 12?
Oh, yeah, I was 10 or 12. And good story. I mean, and it ties into kind of these adventures that we have later on. But good story. I started riding with my cousins in the neighborhood. I'll just backtrack a little bit. My father has 12 brothers and sisters, and my mother has 12 brothers and sisters.
Whoa. So that's a big family.
So I have quite a few cousins, but the ones close to where I grew up were, into motorcycles, and their, parents and stuff were into motorcycles. Enter Merlin Smith, my closest cousin, and his father, who was a motorcyclist too. So Merlin had got a little CT 90 or 70, I forget. And we used to do laps around the farm down there with it and trade off. And then it just kind of went from there. Merlin's father, Merle, I got my first motorcycle, my own, in a box. My father bought it for me, and it was in a box. And Merlin's father, Merle, who was the family mechanic, so to speak, the area's mechanic, he asked Merle if he would fix it. And Merle said, I won't fix it unless your son, me, helps me do it. He goes, he needs to learn. It had a broken Kickstarter shaft, so the engine had to be completely split down the middle. It was a 76 KE 100 street and trail. So that's where I learned to wrench and just fell in love with the whole idea of the motorcycles and being able to repair it yourself, that kind of stuff.
There's nothing better than like building your own motorcycle. There's something about that adds to riding is fantastic on its own. For anybody who's only done that, that is a fantastic thing on its own. But when you build your bike, especially as a young kid, when it's a new thing, and you get to that point where you're actually going to be able to get on it after all of that work, that builds a solid foundation of a real love for the entire sport.
Like Jim, it sounds like you've done the same thing or worked on bikes when you were young also, right? And it gives you a connection to the motorcycle, to it's now, as as the years go by, it's almost like I'm my most comfortable. I'm sure I'm comfortable in lots of things, but I'm my most comfortable when I'm in my shop working on my bike. It's something about it, like you said, that just connects you to the motorcycle, connects you to the sport, that makes you love it.
So transitioning from that young, excited, ride the bike like crazy all around your local neighborhood, probably places
Right.
you shouldn't have been, to actually getting on the road and throwing bags on it and turning it into something else, sort of like the next adventure by motorcycle. How did that happen?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this interview because, like I've told you, that I don't do things like this. It's just a one-off for me, I guess. And so I've been thinking a lot about it and why we started and what inspired me. And I think I was in 2010. I was on I'm going to call it an adventure with work. We got to work out during the Olympics for a full month. I wore many hats in the RCMP at the time, but one was being a part of the crowd control squads, or commonly known as a riot squad. So we were all in Vancouver and, to be there just in case during the Olympics to make sure there was no problems and just added security and whatnot. And I was able to, explore on some of my days off and go snowboarding and up in the mountains. And this has nothing to do with motorcycling, but when I told my cousin Merlin, that I've had a great time on my time off, and plus just the work was interesting, and he's like, God, you're having an adventure at work, and he's working away building a excavation business, and we kind of started reminiscing about the old days when we rode, for all those years growing up, and we rode at the back roads of southern New Brunswick and many places we probably weren't supposed to be. And I think we were kind of missing each other's company because I'll backtrack a little bit. I got hired by the RCMP in New Brunswick, but I got transferred to Toronto, Ontario when I was 19. So there was that disconnect there with distance. And so we just said, we have to do something together. Like, I would visit once a year at least to go to New Brunswick hunting with my family and stuff. And we'd get to see Merlin for like an afternoon. And it would always go for a motorcycle ride, or he would say, you can ride one of my dirt bikes or whatever. So back to 2010, we just said, we've got to start doing something together. And then shortly after that, we're having a barbecue in my local area, which another character of this story, Steve Turnbull, he was at this barbecue and was telling us about his great motorcycle adventure. Him and his friend drove the Trans-Lab Highway, and it just clicked. Got home that day and called Merlin. I said, I've got an idea, and to take like 7 to 14 days off and go motorcycle riding into the back countries of, our provinces. So, yeah, that's kind of where that kind of started. And it was shortly after that, of course, we saw Charlie and Ewan's adventure. And things started to take off from there. And that's when the plan started. Our first trip was in 2011.
So that first trip is the Trans-Labrador.
It was the Trans-Lab, yes. And that almost should be a topic of your show. That was a folly of just a bunch of Anytown Canada guys getting together and piling a bunch of stuff on bikes to go camping. It was quite entertaining, but that was a big trip.
For those that don't know, just talk about the Trans-Lab.
The Trans-Lab is a access highway. I'm going to call them a highway because I think a lot of the times they're referred to that. But it's an access road for mining services, hydro services. And this particular one goes from northern Quebec, Baie-Comeau, Quebec, up into the eastern part of Quebec and crosses into Labrador, which is another province of Canada. And it goes clear across Labrador to the ocean at Goose Bay / Cartwright. And it's a long dirt road. I forget the kilometers now, but I'm sure it's 1,000 kilometers, but I'm sure you can correct me on that one, Jim. And it was one of the dual sport or adventure bike riders' bucket list trips, that I knew of. And then kind of starting doing online research, that I realized that a lot of adventure riders wanted to ride that long road of the Trans-Lab. All dirt road, pretty much. All dirt road at the time, and middle of the nowhere scenario.
What's at the end?
Well, at that time, they had just finished the loop in 2011. They had just finished the loop, I guess, from Quebec to the Labrador, to the ferry that goes from Labrador to Newfoundland proper. Prior to that, just a few years prior to that, there wasn't even a road from that connected it all the way through. I can't remember the exact date, but so you could do the loop. You could go from Quebec, drive through northern Quebec, Labrador, and down to the ferry that crosses the straits there to Newfoundland. But our goal was to go to Cartwright. We wanted to go to the water on that first trip. We wanted to go to Cartwright and back, which is I think it's on like the Arctic Ocean or something on that side.
Okay, you proposed it at the barbecue. You talk about this trip. All of your buddies are going to ride it. It's going to be a huge adventure. It's the Trans-Lab trip. This is the first trip that you're doing with your buddies. This first time you attempt this new idea of these rides. Talk about that trip.
The Trans-Lab was our first trip together. We had 12 people, and we had lots of problems and people pulling out and crashes and this, that, and the other thing. There was only 4 of us that actually completed what we did to go to Cartwright and back. There was 2 crashes on this Trans-Lab trip, 2 crashes that ended up in the hospital in Goose Bay. And one guy medicaled out type of thing with a sore hip on day 2 of the trip. And then one guy's bike didn't even last the first day. And then 3 guys, once we got to Goose Bay, they said, "You guys go on down to Cartwright. We'll wait for you on the way back." We've had it. Type enough. Yeah. So that was funny. So that was the Trans-Lab. So a whole bunch of there was 5 people. Absolutely, they're not doing that again. Doing these adventure trips again. The next year, we wanted to do the dual sport bucket list of going to the end of the Trans-Taiga. Again, another very, very long dirt road in northern Quebec and back. We wanted to explore that and check that off of the adventure bike trips. Yeah, so because of the folly of not errors, but just the accidents and stuff of the previous year, and the newbies realizing that, this is hard. This is hard going. This is not, a drive to Cape Breton and back type of thing on the pavement. This is hard. It's difficult and challenging. So a lot of people dropped out, and then the second trip of our group was our first attempt at the Trans-Taiga. Yeah, and we kind of refined some of our packing systems, our luggage, our equipment. We did some modifications on our bikes, but still wasn't quite good enough.
Okay, so the first trip was obviously tough enough. You lost a bunch of people from that. So who ended up going on this next trip, which is your second trip, but it's the first Trans-Taiga trip, what you call the Trans-Taiga trip? Who's going on that?
It got really pared down to my family and our close friends that are hardcore, motorcyclists, bikers type of thing.
So how many riders?
So that attempt, that was 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there was a half a dozen. Yeah, there was 6 people on that one. We drove up. We got up to Radisson in northern Quebec, and that's a hydro town, a well-established hydro town, and it's only about 150 kilometers east of James Bay. So we got up to there, and we fueled up and took a left turn, so to speak, going towards James Bay because we wanted to camp on James Bay. So, we're driving on these dirt roads, these government maintained dirt roads, and pretty boring, right? We saw a moose, but dirt road, trees, dirt road, trees, dirt road, trees. And as we got out closer to the water, we could start to see the bay on the right side. And so guys started to look or gawk at it. And Richard, my friend there, he stopped his bike as we kind of got to a turn. And the people, I was right behind him. And so I pulled over. And then the people behind us were looking at the water. And Tyler, big Tyler, he was on this old Honda 650. He saw Richard at the last minute and had to do some emergency turning, and he launched himself right off the road into the ditch and into bushes and trees and stuff. But he was okay, he stood up and put his hands up in the air, way down in the ditch, and I'm okay. So we're like, okay, good.
So hang on before you go any further. So this is the Trans-Taiga that you're going on. You've got half a dozen people, and what's the point of this trip? What are you guys after?
So, and again, this is the first attempt we're talking about of the Trans-Taiga. So our point was to go to the end of the road of the Trans-Taiga, which is a 650 kilometer long dirt road that runs along the La Grande and La Forge rivers to service hydro projects. It's literally in the middle of nowhere. It goes to the middle of nowhere, and the end of the road is the furthest away from a town that you can be on a road in, I don't know, North America or whatever. It's 750 kilometers away from a town. So that was our goal, but you access that road from the James Bay Road. And so we wanted to go camp on James Bay on the west of the James Bay Road before we entered the Trans-Taiga, which is on the east of the James Bay Road.
So this is your first attempt. You've got one person that's landed in the ditch. Well, what happens next?
And another guy, we put the bike up on some rocks. We set up our tents because we were there on the James Bay. And so we put the bike up on some rocks and straightened some spokes or straightened some rims, and with adjusting spokes and putting pieces back together, and got his bike kind of running. And then on the return to Radisson from James Bay, my buddy Richard got into a speed wobble in loose gravel on the road and crashed his bike, probably going about 40 kilometers an hour, and broke his thumb. So we got him patched up. And when we got back into Radisson, Tyler's bike gave up the ghost there with the spokes breaking in it. And it was toast. So that we decided then that was the end of our first attempt, packed our stuff up and waved at the Trans-Taiga Road on the way by and said, we'll be back next year. Tyler shipped his bike south to where our trucks were in Chibougamau, Quebec. And we slowly rode home with Richard kind of all busted up and stuff. So that was the first attempt.
So you felt like that wasn't not an accomplishment. It wasn't accomplished. Maybe wasn't fulfilled, that trip.
Yeah, we wanted to do this ride, and again, it was time for us. These were weeks that we got together as friends and family to spend quality time together. So we knew we were going to ride every year, so we just said we'll see you next year, and we're going to finish it.
Okay, so the next year you set it up. What happens? You get the same riders?
No, we lost Richard for a couple of years because he's a self-employed carpenter, and he goes, guys, I can't break my fingers and hands. It's going to cost me my money or my job, type of thing. Because our group is just everyday citizens, blue collar workers, policemen and business owners. Keith, my buddy, he runs a fuel delivery company, and Steve is another great story. But we're just like, we have to get back to our jobs. I call us, blue collar, everyday people, just looking for a little bit of adventure and spending time together. And
you got a time limit, right? You only have so much vacation time. Yeah.
Yeah. So The following year, we lost Richard and Tyler. Tyler said he's done. He's had two years, 2 breakdowns. So yeah, and that was down to kind of 4 of us. And then Steve, the original inspirational guy, old Steve, he said he would like to come. So there was only 5 of us: myself, Merlin, my cousin, Keith, my very good motorcycle friend, Steve, my motorcycle friend, inspirational guy, and then Merlin. It was the first year that Merlin's son came with us, Stephen. So there was the 5 of us.
And what's your feeling about this trip? I mean, is there a real point to getting to the end?
100%. We just said, we're going to do it this year. And we really, after 2 years of, some of our friends crashing and stuff like that, we started to take the actual weight of the bike serious, the weight of our equipment serious. All of the bikes we were starting to get into the modifications that a lot of adventure guys do to these DRZs and the DRs and stuff. And then equipment. I'd always had a really good quality, lightweight, marmot tent and sleeping pad and stuff. But everything got much, much smaller. I think or at least I did, I reduced like 40 pounds of equipment down to like 20, 22.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the other guys did much the same, and then heavily modified the suspension of our bikes, with aftermarket performance shocks and springs and dampeners and braces. And a lot of the times we put the performance exhaust on our bikes just to cut off 8 to 10 pounds, stuff like that. So we were kind of a little bit more prepared this time around. We were, for lack of a better term, taking it much more serious.
Right. And you've got a goal. Like you guys are serious about accomplishing this.
And we're going to the end of that. We're going to the end of that road, and we're going to camp at the end of that road. if it's the last thing we do, so to speak.
Right. Get trained, get outfitted, and get inspired to explore the world at Overland Expo West this May 16th to 18th at the Fort Tuthill County Park in Flagstaff, Arizona. This is an amazing area to ride in as well. So if I were you, I'd book some time before or after this and go exploring. They have so much going on. Get this, over 400 vendors. That is unbelievable. Only Overland Expo can do this. They've got so many motorcycle specific things like motorcycle demos. They got a Friday moto party. I mean, you can even park close to the gate with the right pass just because you're riding a motorcycle. This is the premier event for overland adventure enthusiasts. Get inspired with authors and filmmakers and world travelers and creators hosting workshops and classes and storytelling sessions that bring adventure to life right there in front of you. You get to connect with fellow explorers. Overland Expo West this May 16th through 18th. Overlandexpo.com. Anytime you're dealing with them, throw in there that you heard them here on Adventure Rider Radio. Overlandexpo.com. The warmest and most comfortable mid-layer that I've ever tried is the Purley's Hugger. Now, the Hugger is perfect for motorcycle riding for a number of reasons, but honestly, it's perfect for any outdoor activity. It will outdo anything that you can buy on the market out there. It's made from 20% New Zealand possum fur, 70% merino wool, and 10% silk. This is ultra soft, lightweight, and compactable. I think it's like 10 ounces or 280 grams. It's made for motorcycle riding, literally. It's got a tall collar and a partial zip. It's knitted in one piece, so there's no seams to bunch up under your jacket. That's done on purpose. The merino wool and possum fur and the silk make the warmest mid-layer on the planet. But those natural fibers also prevent mold from growing under normal conditions, so it won't stink even if you've worn it for days underneath your jacket. The same fibers wick moisture away from your skin, and they retain heat even when they're wet. These are far better than anything you can buy on the market that's synthetic. PurleysPossumSocks.com is the website. Anytime you're dealing with them, throw in that you heard them here on Adventure Rider Radio. PurleysPossumSocks.com. It's called the Purley's Hugger.
Pack small, camp easy. That's Moto Camp Nerd. Moto Camp Nerd is the motorcycle camping store specializing in camping gear for us riders. Ben and Mary Williams, the owners of Moto Camp Nerd, say that all the gear they stock in their brick and mortar store in Archdale, North Carolina, has been thoughtfully chosen for its pack size and durability for motorcycle camping. Specifically, it's what they do. Moto Camp Nerd are authorized dealers for brand names like Nemo Equipment, Big Agnes, Sea to Summit, and Climb riding gear. You can order online from their website or, like I say, walk into that Archdale, North Carolina store and buy it right off the shelf. And if you need help deciding what best suits your setup, Ben and Mary are happy to help you sort it out. And they know this stuff. They live and breathe this stuff. So deal with the motorcycle camping pros at motocampnerd.com. And anytime you do, throw in there that you heard them here on Adventure Rider Radio. motocampnerd.com. Right. So now, is there one bike that isn't as prepared as the others?
I was waiting for this one. Yes. God
Is
bless
that Steve?
Yeah, Steve Turnbull, a wonderful soul. He did this Translab years and years ago on this Africa Twin 650, a very, very old one. Actually, I don't think it's called an Africa Twin. Transalp, that's what it is. A 1987 Transalp, and so when he asked to go, or not asked to go, when he said he would like to come, I said, right on. He said, what are you going to ride? He goes, bring in my old Transalp, never let me down type of thing. So, and he's one of those characters that you meet in life and become friends with. And, you know, he's a topic of conversation. He's a conversationalist. He's magical, you know, in a entertaining way. It almost kind of reminds me, you interviewed a guy a long, long time ago, and I want to say his name was Israel, and he fought with police in other countries, and it was just like a character. And not that Steve would do that, but he was just one of those, you know, robust characters and just a storyteller. Just a wonderful, wonderful guy. So he's going to do this on the old 87 Transalp that has probably 100,000 kilometers on it. He's got like a muffler on it from a 75 Harley Davidson. And it's just, and on our drive up to Shubugamu, we just wanted to kill 1,000 kilometers in a truck, just to get to like the adventure area. So we're riding up in the truck, myself, Keith, and Steve. And we're talking about our bikes and stuff like that. And Steve just casually throws out there, well, I hope the old bike works good. Wasn't working very good there when I was trying her out there before we loaded it. He goes, but it should work itself out. When I'm like, what? It should? What? Steve, you know, I'm like, Steve, no. He goes, it should be fine. It should be fine. You know, and he was not worried one bit whether that bike was going to run or not. Like, and I'm looking over at Keith, you know, with the side eye, and Keith's giving me the side eye back. And we're just like, you know, eyebrows up going,
oh no.
Yeah. Not, oh no, but just like, oh, Steve, you know, bless his heart. He's, and it stayed running, but it was just, you know, one of those guys. His bike was loaded up like Jed Clampett's truck and trailer going to Beverly Hills. Like Jim, like he had 2 gas cans, because, you know, that'll come later in the story, but he had 2 gas cans, but he put one down low on the bike because it kind of had a leak in it. So he goes, I put that one down low because it leaks a little bit. And we're like, $10, you can get a new gas can, Steve. Come on, man. But that was him. And yeah, he's such an entertaining and wonderful person. So anyway,
And I assume the others meet you there at the end of this 1,000 kilometers to actually launch the bikes?
yes, because Merlin and Steven, of course, live in New Brunswick. So that was another thing with these rides, that we would come together somewhere, I want to say somewhere in between, but it went on differently and years after that. But we would meet somewhere, and they met us there and at a campsite in Chibougamau, and we had dinner and a nice breakfast and headed out the following morning.
So when you guys are heading out, what are you equipped like as far as your emergency, your backup gear? I know you've got your camping gear. I assume everybody does. What are the sort of things? Like, do you have satellite transmitters, anything like that?
Well, it's funny you should ask, because after the incidents in Labrador and with the crashes and stuff and how we had to communicate again, it's almost like smoke signals. We realized, this is not good. This no communication thing is not good. And, I have the means, and most of us have the means to get something like that. So I was able to get a satellite phone, like one of those Meridian satellite phones, through work. I didn't realize we had them for us to use for any application. So we had a whole bank of them. So from then on, I would sign out a satellite phone from work just for emergencies, stuff like that. So that first trip, the first Trans-Taiga try, we had it with us. And then the second one, of course, I carried it with me every year. And Keith, maybe not on that trip, but the trip after that, he started to run a spot on his bike. So we did have a satellite phone, which was, it's a nice thing to have. And I kind of think it's essential now.
And you guys are all planning to travel together. There's no plan of, if you get to a certain point and somebody doesn't want to go, you're going to split off.
No, this trip here, because of previous trips, we said we're staying together, we're finishing it together, or we're going home, together, that kind of thing. So we were staying together. We all kind of rode the same kind of style, speed, that kind of thing. So we were planning definitely to stay together.
So Chris, before we get into the actual story of what happened on this trip, I'm wondering about the makeup of the group here. So you've got 5 riders here. Is there a leader? Is there somebody in charge who's going to say, at the end of the day, I'm going to be the one that makes the final decision? Or is it just going to be a vote and argue down, or how did it work?
Well, that kind of fell onto my shoulders. I was the defunct leader pretty much, on most of the rides. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just in my makeup or whatever, or work type of thing, or it's just the way it is type of thing. But I would be kind of, part of the part, or completely did the planning for the trips. And then it just seemed to default to me. But of course, we would all agree together. I got to tell you, from the second trip on, our group that we ride together, the family and the friends, were like a really good unit. Everybody kind of felt the same way about everything. And, we would have a couple of riders in our groups over the years where they're just like, don't care. You make the decision, you lead, you do the GPS tracks. Don't care. I'm along for the ride. I need a brain break for a week or 10 days. I'm just, so it just kind of, everybody just kind of matched up really good from that perspective. So we didn't really have, everybody was kind of all the same, on the same wavelength. Steve, different channel, but still a pretty easygoing guy.
Right. Okay. So you get riding. What happens?
So we get riding, and again, like I told you, we've reduced our equipment down to, we're thinking we're pretty good on the DRs and the DRZs and stuff like that. But funny enough, we left Chibougamau raining, and the boys from New Brunswick decided they were going to buy rain suits from Canadian Tire, just these cheap ones. and they just literally blew off them in the first hours of driving. And so that was that was funny. So yeah, we take off in the rain and from Chibougamau to get to the North Road, which is another long dirt road that kind of connects the Chibougamau area to the James Bay Road, the north-south road that runs from Matagami up to Radisson.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's going good. I mean, we got rained on, and then shortly, like a half an hour on the North Road, we drive right out of the rain, and it's just like desert dust type conditions. And so we, stripped off the rain suits and started to ride the dirt roads like we usually do, spaced out, half a kilometer apart, just after the dust drops from the motorcycle rider in front of you, that kind of thing. And just having a nice little ride on a dirt road, decent weather. And we get to the Rupert River area and started to see smoke and stuff like that, and we're like, well, what do we have here? I've also forgot to mention about what I call safety equipment is helmet communicators. Myself and Keith were hooked up with helmet communicators. Merlin and Steven, they had a set for themselves to keep in contact with. Invaluable. That's invaluable for riding and sketchy, adventure bike riding and stuff, just to be able to tell somebody behind you that there's an obstacle or whatever, or the whip to tell you, Steve has just broke down. Everybody stop. So really, it's really good. Of course, you've talked to many people that's said the same thing, but I did want to mention that.
Yeah, and some people don't, though. Some people really don't like them, communicators at all, which I find odd. But I mean, everybody's different, right? As far as how they like to ride. Some people find it too distracting. But I tend to agree with you that I think they're extremely valuable because just the thing of sticking out on your left, as you're coming along a trail, making a corner or something, you missed it, but the next person may not.
And I've experienced it several times. That that's real. That really does help. And I checked the box of, that is a safety item. That's a box checked for me. So,
So what are you thinking at this point of the smoke?
Well, I think we took a side road off of the North Road, and I think it just accessed like just a lookout point overlooking kind of the Rupert River Valley type of thing. Again, these aren't necessarily high traveled tourist areas like hardly anybody, but you find the province of Quebec will just do something like that in the middle of nowhere, which is admirable. Like it's, we really noticed it, like it stood out for us on our travels in northern Quebec over the years. So we took this road and we're driving, and then we start to really see the smoke, and we drive up to this lookout point, and look, here we go, the forest fires off in the distance and stuff. Park the bikes, guys, put them up here. Let's get a picture of us, in front of the forest fires and so not really concerned other than making sure we get a good picture. And then we, and then as we were leaving that road or further on down, like we kind of had to drive through the fires burning on each side of the road. So, I get out the camera and, talk to Keith on the communicator, hold back. I'm going to video you guys driving through the smoke and stuff like that. Again, pretty casual look on it, and using it as photo op type of thing.
Right. Do you have any way to check, like a radio or anything to check to get any news on the state of the forest fire?
No, see that the only thing that we could have done is perhaps light up the sat phone and call somebody down south to see anything. But, I have, in my younger days, I've had experience with forest fires and was like a part-time when there was a forest fire in New Brunswick or, of course, all across Canada. They will hire temporary forest firefighters to help control them. And so, was taking it kind of casual because we're looking at the height of the trees and, the smoke and the wind. And we're like, well, this is not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So our opinion was, well, it isn't going to be a raging forest fire because we're in the middle of nowhere and the trees are only 15, 20 feet tall type of thing.
How bad can it be?
And how bad could it be, right?
Right.
How bad could it be? Get a picture of us beside it, So, yes, we had no link or didn't even think about calling and seeing what was going on. So onward we went.
Now, are you riding, because you said you rode through the flames at one point on both sides of the road. So do you feel like you're riding, like you've passed the fire and you're riding beyond it?
Well, yeah, that is probably exactly what we were thinking at the time.
Right.
Yeah, we're just going to ride on through, and we did and kind of got out of that area of the North Road. And then as we traveled along the North Road, we fueled up at I don't know if it's a mining station or whatever, I think it's called Caniapiscau. We fueled up there, and a couple of people was like, "Oh yeah, watch the forest fires. No big deal. Watch out for this." And not a big deal. Nobody was really, overly concerned about it, like us. So we kept driving, and now we're driving east on the North Road, going towards the James Bay Road, and we were planning to camp on a little lake that we kind of saw on maybe somebody's ride report or a map, or I don't know. We were going to camp at this little lake out, off the grid type of thing. And the smoke was, we started to smell the smoke. We were like, is this dust or smoke? And it was smoke. We had been driving in it so long. You know how you don't recognize the smells anymore?
Yeah. You just get used to it. You're breathing it continuously. You just get used to it, and no longer stands out.
Right, exactly. And our litmus test was Merlin's son. He would get like headaches and stuff from the smell of smoke and stuff. So he was like, "I got a headache. This is smoke," So we were going to camp there, but we stopped, and Steven's head was killing him. He's just a young fella, right? He was only 16, 17 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, "Just keep driving, guys. Let's just keep riding, see if we can ride out of it." And we did. We rode on to the James Bay, got to the James Bay Road and went north and started to ride out of that region, fire, smoke area, whatever, and found a little place to camp.
Right. And the road you're on, it's a dead end.
The James Bay Road ends in Radisson. Yes. Yeah.
Mm. So you're going to have to backtrack, obviously, and come right back out the same way you rode in.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. This is definitely an out and back adventure ride for sure.
Right. So the fire you left behind
was
potentially could be there.
It will be there probably when we get back. You're right.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, we kind of get to this little campsite, and it was cleared up. So all thoughts of the fire was gone.
Right. And fires are not unusual. Fires, I mean, every summer we have forest fires like this. So it's not like, smelling a fire is something, it's not like a house burning, it's not so alarming. I mean, that would make sense.
Right. And, me and you both live in Canada, and it is very, very common in Canada or North America to have a forest fire or many burning, spring, summer, and fall. So right. Yeah, it's a regular happenstance here for us in Canada. So it wasn't totally unusual.
Right. So what happens next?
So we set up camp on this nice little lake. And of course, Steve provides us the entertainment and puts his tent right out on a dock or so, like a dock. He decides to put his tent out there and starts cooking I don't know. I think he melted a half a pound of chocolate with this oatmeal. Jim, this guy, he'd keep pulling things out of his saddlebags that would, make all the rest of us all look at each other and, inwardly smile and laugh and stuff. But yeah, he was the evening's entertainment. Of course, we ate and had a really good night's sleep there and packed her up the next morning and headed north.
Mm-hmm.
And we would, halfway on the James Bay Road, there's a fuel station kind of between Matagami and Radisson. I think it's like at the 350 mark or something. So we fueled up there at this fuel station, and we were because we pushed ahead on our trip, like another 150 kilometers further than we were planning to go. We were kind of ahead of schedule. So we decided, instead of going out to camp on James Bay for Steve and Stephen to experience camping on James Bay, that was our original plan, was to go north and go to the bay, camp there, and then travel back east into the Trans-Taiga. We decided to fuel up a few of our extra fuel cans, and take a right turn off the James Bay Road onto the Trans-Taiga and head inland and try to get to a hunting and fishing outfitter that we had called ahead and planned to stay overnight there. So we did that.
How far is that?
So that fishing outfitter it's on the Trans-Taiga, obviously, and it's about, I want to say, 300 kilometers in the Trans-Taiga. So I think we had to cover about 500 kilometers without fuel. So for most of us, we had to fill up just one 5-liter can. Most of us could get about 300 to 400 kilometers on our tank. So about 300 kilometers inland on the Trans-Taiga, and it was a tough ride that day.
So 500 kilometers, that's about 300 miles for those who know miles.
Yeah.
What do you mean, talk about tough ride?
Well, a lot of your guests have talked about the dirt roads and stuff like that, but these roads are well maintained by either the government or the hydroelectric companies that require that road to service their facilities. So they're graded often. There's graders on that road every day, all day. I don't know if it's year round, but for sure, spring, summer, and fall months. But so it was a freshly graded road. It was about 1 inch of freshly graded gravel sand mix type of thing. It had about 1 inch of loose surface there. That's one of the killers for people traveling off road or on these dirt roads is this soft gravel. Can put your bike into speed wobbles, and people have crashed and stuff. Again, first-hand experience here.
You tend to wallow through it. It's just difficult to keep a straight line, but also uses more fuel.
It would use more fuel, and because I'd found, and myself and all of the guys, I'd found that it's better to run. It's safer to run in a lower gear at higher revs. So as soon as you get a wiggle or a wobble, your power is right there to lighten the front end and kind of power up out of the wiggle.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't very noticeable for us. Tended to have just a tiny bit more fuel than we thought we would need anyway.
Giant Loop believes lighter and simpler is better, and how and where we ride shouldn't be dictated by what's strapped onto our motorcycles. Riding is just plain more fun when unnecessary weight and bulk are removed. Sound thought process, I think. Giant Loop eliminates elements, focusing on what's needed to serve the product's mission. No extra straps, no extra buckles. Instead,
Each product is purpose-built to enhance the riding experience for those who want modular, customizable packing systems that's durable, stable, intuitive, and lightweight. Giant Loop Moto is the website. Anytime you're dealing with them, throw in there that you heard them here on Adventure Rider Radio. GiantLoopMoto.com. If you want to have real control of your motorcycle, ride like the pros do on IMS Products foot pegs. IMS has a full range of adventure motorcycle foot pegs designed specifically for what we do. They're warranted for life. They're made in the USA. IMSproducts.com is a website. Anytime you're dealing with them, throw in them that you heard them here on Adventure Rider Radio. IMSproducts.com. You all had gas cans in the back? Is that what you did?
Oh, boy. Yeah. That's time of year to do the Trans-Taiga. This was late June. And a lot of the adventure riders that, I'd either read about or heard about would get fuel from a fishing outfitter that was set up at the very end of the road, at the reservoir, at the very end of the Trans-Taiga Road. And they would buy fuel from this fishing outfitter. But I was doing a lot of research about this and made quite a few calls and found out that this particular outfitter wouldn't be up for business, so to speak, until mid-July. So we were going before that outfitter was open. So we had to plan to cover 700 kilometers without fuel. So we had a whole fleet of super tankers going out the Trans-Taiga. We filled up all of our gas cans and tied them on our bikes. I sent you a couple of pictures there with various configurations of gas tanks on our different bikes. And
yeah, we'll put those in the show notes.
Yeah. And so we filled up 3 gas cans each. We drove out 100 kilometers because all of our bikes pretty much averaged about 5 liters per 100. So we drove out 100 kilometers, dumped 1 5-liter can into our gas tanks of the bike, and then we hid the second, a second can in the woods and put a little flag on the trees for us to pick up on the way back. So we weren't carrying, 5 liters out and back. And so we left that point with just 1 5-liter can on our bike to keep us as light as possible.
You marked that with a GPS or anything? You just put a bit of flagging tape on a tree?
No, but of course I had a GPS too, but why would I, right? Like, why would I, why would you mark that with a GPS? Are you crazy? Crazy talking right there. Oh, that's the other thing. They did have mile markers on those roads. And someone goes, it's between mile marker X and Y.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So, but, hindsight and experience, of course, you just put a pin there. Yeah. There's probably even an icon that you could get out of your GPS with a gas can,
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what happens next?
Well, we get out to the end. And the reservoir is called Caniapiscau. It's a huge body of water that's backed up with a ginormous retaining wall, all done by Quebec Hydro or Hydro-Quebec. It was just amazing. Like the retaining walls, it was one of the biggest things that you would come across, on a bike ride like that. It was pretty spectacular. And we drove up onto the top of the retaining wall, set up our tents, and we built a big bonfire and stayed overnight and then headed back. So the return back, the graders had gone somehow in between, us going out and coming back, and it was switched on riding for the next full day to get back to the Mirage. But we stopped and found our gas cans without the GPS. And made it back to the Mirage.
The Mirage was the outfitters you stayed at. Fishing camp.
Yeah.
Okay. And when do you see smoke again?
So we're at the Mirage, and that's when the people at the Mirage started to talk. They come talk to us and go, "Hey guys, like there's some serious forest fires here." And he said, "Like the road is closed here. The Taiga is closed about 100 kilometers away from James Bay." And I go, how bad can it be? the trees are 12 feet tall. And, we are all set up and ready to go. And he said, okay, well, I'll make a couple more calls. And, yeah, look, you should be able to get through. You should be able to get through. I haven't heard any reports, and a lot of vague comments type of thing and information that was coming through to him at least. And there was a little bit of a language barrier because our last French guy crashed and broke his thumb the previous year.
So this road you're talking about, the he first mentioned was possibly closed. That's the road you have to ride out.
That's the road we have to ride out on the Trans-Taiga just to get out to Radisson.
Right. That's the only road.
Well, yeah, like there's, so the Trans-Taiga, again, goes back west towards the James Bay Road. And he was talking about the actual Taiga being closed. So we're like, okay. Right. And then he's like, well, maybe it isn't. And he said, maybe you're just going to have to go check. So we're like, yeah, we're rolling. We're going to roll it. We checked our big box. We're going home, that kind of thing on our bucket list. So we ride back on the Taiga, and we started to see smoke before we even got to the James Bay Road. And as we got closer and closer, we're like, yeah, this is going here. We stopped, took a quick video, and said, let's run her. Let's drive through it. And that one there, we could actually feel the heat of the fire. And we got through that. So we had to ride 100 kilometers north on the James Bay Road to get fuel, just so we could ride kind of back and go out to the bay. And we said, we're going to camp on the bay for the guys who haven't done it before. So we're like, okay, we're through it again. Yay. Just a side note there about us working on our own bikes and stuff like that. Keith talks to me in the helmet. He goes, my bike just quit on me. So we come back and, run through the checks. Is it fire? Is it spark? Is it fuel? We determined it was fuel. So just on the side of the road, me and him took the carburetor off, completely off the bike, completely washed it out with fuel from the tank, and reassembled it, and away it goes. And, I'm not bragging or anything, but it's one of those things that by learning to work on your own bikes and repair them and stuff like that, it wasn't a big deal. Well, we'll just take the carburetor off and fix it,
What was the thought that the float was stuck?
It was actually just the dust had, because Keith was behind me for a lot of it, and or Whip at the end of the group. He was just eating dust all the time, and I think it just broke through the factory air filters. We all have aftermarket high quality air filters now. It just broke through, and the just gummed up, jets, bowls, main jets, whatever.
Yeah.
Fueled up, and off we went, and headed out to the bay, out to Shashabi, small village that's out on the bay. And we camped there for the night. Oh, Steve, he pulled a stainless steel pail out of his saddlebags. And we thought he was going to cook something in it, but he was making coffee with it. And he goes, it's the cowboy coffee. Everybody knows that. I go, what are you talking about, man? And he put the coffee in the pail and boiled water in it.
Yeah.
And then he swung it around like, over his head, just, in circles, just swinging it really hard. And then he goes, then you just gently pour off the coffee, leaving the grounds in the bottom. And I'm like, I'm holding like a little instant pack of, Tim Hortons coffee, going, wouldn't it be easier just to pour water on it? Okay, no. You do you.
Every time I hear this, the cowboy thing, I've seen it and I've tried it when I was younger, but to me, it's just a recipe for disaster. You're camping and you're swinging around a pot of boiling water. It's absolutely insane.
But a pail.
Yeah.
It's just on a trip where we know weight is an issue and stuff. And, he'd already crashed twice at this point, in the trip. Oh gosh, like I said, he was entertaining, and like I said, I love this guy. I don't know if you know people like that, but he's just one of those people that you just got to go talk to and hang around. And back to the story.
Right. So what's next?
We ride back to Radisson. That, like I said before, that's the main town, the hydro town at the very end of the North Road, the very northern town city. It's just a town, the northern town for to service and house all of these hydro workers for the region up there. So back to Radisson, and we were going to stay there the night anyway. So we get back there, and that's when we started to hear, okay, there's fires all over the north here, and the road is closed going south out of the north. So we drove down to where they said it was closed to check it out, and sure enough, there's a roadblock there. The Sûreté, the Quebec provincial police are there. Yeah, no go. They're really bad to the south of us, and we're like, oh, okay,
So this strands you guys. I mean, and you've all got deadlines, of course.
Yeah, it locks us. So we were like, wow, we'll go back. We'll back to Radisson. They had a nice little campsite there, so we went back there and set up camp and started chatting with local people, and of course, I started chatting with some of the local policemen. There's like, I don't know, half a dozen Sûreté up there in this town. So I started chatting with one, and he said he would keep us up to date. And he said, but it's really bad. And, so of course we're like average Joe Canadians, right? We all have these jobs and deadlines, and, we have lives to get back to. And so we're like, well, how long is it going to be? I don't know. Then we started calling home and letting the family know that we're
could be delayed.
Yeah, that we could be delayed. And so that's when they're watching the news and go, this is bad, guys. Like, this is really bad.
Mm-hmm.
So being like, well, I think we're all kind of like that, but I like to say sometimes, being the policeman that I was, I got to investigate. Okay, how bad is this? And where is it? Which way is the wind direction? And which way are the fires going? Pulling some of my experiences of the past, going, okay, wind direction, long-term weather forecast, that kind of thing. And luckily we had campsite and food, and, had a town to kind of stock us up. But the town was starting to get worried even after, like, the first 20 hours or whatever of the being blocked, because James Bay Road is their only way of supplies, right?
So whatever they've got is all they've got.
That's all they've got, right? And the town of Chassaby was able to get to Radisson, and Radisson was kind of like the hub. It seemed like it anyway. So vans and SUVs started to come in from that town, picking up groceries and water and supplies and stuff. And we're like, holy.
And there's nothing like, in a situation like that, of seeing someone rush in and do some fast shopping to get you thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah, of course. Like I said, we watched vans come in. They were just loading like cases of water out of this little grocery store and canned goods. And we're like, okay, we got to do the same. So
yeah. How much can there be in there in the small store?
Yeah. And so we bought a little bit of supplies, and we're like, okay, we better fill up our fuel tanks. We don't know if we're going to need them, but let's just fill up our fuel tanks. We can always give somebody fuel if we don't need them, but we made the best of it. We were stuck there for 2 nights, but we made the best of it in the full day in between. Me and Merlin went for a little bike ride on some of the local trails up there. And then we realized that we could go on a guided tour of the Robert Bourassa Dam, which is right there at Radisson. It's like one of the biggest hydro facilities in the world. So we went on a tour and learned a whole bunch about how they did it, that it was like a wonder of the world to build an 800-kilometer paved road to Radisson in 1 year.
Wow.
And Yeah, I know. It was quite interesting. And then the construction of it, they trucked all the machinery and stuff up from Montreal and the south, and they built this huge kilometers long retaining walls and whatever. And the equipment was wore out after they built it, so they left the equipment inside the retaining wall, and then the water just filled up around it. It wasn't worth it for them to move the equipment back south. Like, it was wore out, and the best thing was to do is just to drain all the fluids and stuff like that, and just leave them in the reservoir.
That's bizarre.
Yeah. Just all these interesting facts that we learned while we were holed up in Radisson.
Did you guys start to get worried at all? I mean, because you do have deadlines. Not only that, I mean, you are in a spot where your escape route is cut off and you've got flames, supposedly fairly close to you.
Yeah, well, guys started to get antsy. I mean, I wasn't too bad because I was a supervisor at the time, and in my job, a detective supervisor, and had a really good boss, was able to touch him up and go, this could be longer. And he's like, yeah, don't worry about it. But, Merlin running a business, he needed to get back. And of course, he has an excavation business. So they're at the height of their yearly work in the summertime, of course.
Sure. Yeah.
Steve was a trailer mechanic, and, just took a week off work. I gotta tell you now, he didn't care, but he didn't care. And Keith ran a fuel company, a fuel delivery company, a big company, or he is high up in this company. And he had a lot of responsibilities in this company. And guys were starting to get a little anxious and wanting to get out of there. And I don't think we ever had the feeling that we were going to be caught in a forest fire, just because we started to gain more information of where they were, and the fires were all to the south of us. And looking at weather patterns and stuff like that, we weren't worried about it getting, for Radisson to get burned out type of thing. But it was, when are we going to get out of here? And how are we going to get out of here? I guess it would have been, kind of, we'll call it day 3, or I forgive me if I forget some of the things, but we finally get the word from the Sûreté guy there. He said, yeah, it's starting to peter out. The fires are starting to slow down a bit down on the James Bay Road. He goes, we're going to organize a guided convoy out of here, because there was, transport trucks and service trucks, and of course people, regular people, and they were all caught up there. So we just said, geez, we need to be in this convoy. And Keith was like, I got to get out of here, guys. Like, we're going to be on this. And and bless his soul, Steve was like, yeah, I was going to fry some fish and lard here before we go anywhere or something. It was just, and Keith was like, come on, man. What, so we could tell it was starting to get a little tense there when Keith and us were going like, Steve, get your shit together. Right.
Right.
Yeah, but
so they want you to go with this guided convoy. In other words, nobody's allowed to go until the convoy goes, and after that, I'm assuming it's going to be cut off until the next thing they do.
Till the next convoy, yeah, right. Yeah. So that's the way I understood it at the time too. There was going to be like certain amount of vehicles per convoy, and we wanted to be in the first one. And I forgot to mention there, we spent like one of the hottest days ever in the north of all of our trips was that the full day that we spent at Radisson. It was like, I don't know, 27 degrees even at nighttime. It was like super hot, and we're like, close to the Arctic Circle or something. I don't know how far up we are, but so anyway, we get the nod there about the convoy. So little tense, getting everybody packed up, getting everybody moving and stuff like that. And when we get down to where they were organizing the convoy, like, I don't know, 20 kilometers south of town. It became a big enough story that some news organizations sent crews up, flew them up to be on the ground in Radisson to talk about it. And we got in the line for the convoy, and it was leaving like, I think it was 6 or 7 in the evening, and it was to make this 7. Well, I think it was just they were going to guide us, like keep us within the convoy for about 600 kilometers. So off we went, and boy, we realized then, like this was serious. The guardrails along the road were melted and twisted. The signs were melted and tipped over. The seriousness of it was just burning across the road, jumping across the road, making, superheating everything, of course. So yeah, short, small trees might not be that big of a deal when you're inland. Oh, I forgot to add that kind of from where the James Bay Road is west to the James Bay itself, the trees got much bigger. So we're kind of on the edge of large trees being, like, I guess, the weather system from the bay makes the trees and the foliage and stuff grow much, much more. So bigger trees by the road and stuff. So my theory of small trees, not too bad. Well, yeah, we're talking burnt signs and melted guardrails, and was really glad that we didn't try, Yeah,
and when you're riding out with a convoy, was that stressful at all? Just because you're having to keep up with all these vehicles, that's a good stretch that you're going to ride.
Yeah, like you're locked into the convoy, and most of the vehicles were actually transport trucks and large trucks, supply trucks, and stuff like that. So yeah, you're kind of wedged in there with the big vehicles, and these trips aren't like that. You're usually with nobody around you.
Yeah, it's not very comfortable when you're forced to keep up a pace of people driving vehicles, while they're in their cabs and all protected by their 4 wheels on the ground.
Yeah. So that was not a fun ride at all. And and they wanted you to keep tight. Like we got instructions from the leader of the convoy, who had a whip behind them. Everybody stay tight and nobody speed up or slow down quickly. All of these rules of some kind of an organized ride, drive type of thing. And the temperature just plummeted to make it even worse. It was getting dark, and somebody said it was like 5 Celsius. Not sure what that is in Fahrenheit, but so dark, convoy, dark, cold, and driving through a wasteland.
Yeah, and that's where if you were riding by yourself, you'd pull over and put some extra gear on. But since you're stuck in the convoy, you sort of got to just shiver and keep riding.
You're absolutely right. And I never thought of that part, but that's right. I remember us talking in the helmet going, oh, please, hopefully we're going to stop at that gas station. Hopefully we're going to stop there. Please stop at the gas station. I got to get an extra pair of gloves on. I got to get this on. I've got a sweater in my thing. Yeah, you know what, Jim? You've just reminded me of that little factor where we're just like, we can't stop.
Yeah. So what happens? Did you just make it out and that was the end of it?
Yeah. So we made it to their end point somewhere on the James Bay Road. And they said, yeah, we're all good south of here. There's no fires. Go do what you're going to do. This is dark out. It's like we're talking 11, 12 at night. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we just drove just a little bit further, looked for one of these little rest areas, and we found one that the province of Quebec sets up. This was on, I think, the other side of the Rupert River, and it was freezing cold, and we were knocking like ice off of our tents in the morning when we woke up because there's a little bit of spray from the river. And had some coffee, and we just packed her up and slammed the pavement all the way back to where the trucks were to kind of finish that year's adventure.
That was Chris Smith from Hockley Valley, Ontario, Canada. We've got some great photos in the show notes that are well worth having a look at from his adventure. All in the show notes for this episode on our website, adventureriderradio.com. Hey, I just want to remind you that this episode has been brought to you by Green Chili Adventure Gear, greenchiliadv.com, Motobreeze Chain Oiler at motobreeze.com, and Best Rest Products at cyclepump.com. And we'd really appreciate it if anytime you're dealing with these companies, anytime email or otherwise, let them know you heard them here on Adventure Rider Radio. Well, that about wraps up another episode of Adventure Rider Radio, and we sure hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as we did making it. Special thanks to our producer, Elizabeth Martin, and you. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. Hey, look, I would really appreciate it if you enjoy the show that we do here every week for you. The other show that we do, Adventure Rider Radio Raw, that comes out the 21st of every month. Please drop by the website, adventureriderradio.com, click on support. There's lots of other stuff there for you to see on the website as well, but click on support. We got a Patreon option that you can do for a monthly donation. It would be great if you would consider supporting the show. We would really appreciate it because we built this on a model of advertising and listener support. And I know times can be fickle, times can be difficult, but we would really appreciate it if you'd just consider supporting. Anyway, time to get out there and ride your bike if you can. My name is Jim Martin. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you next week.
Hi, this is Charlie Borman, and you're listening to Adventure Rider Radio.